All right, he is okay. He was just hungry. So again, these tarsiers and anthropoids split up into groups when the continents split up from Pangea into what we know now, about 45 million years ago. And from these two, we went to the New World monkeys. Oh my goodness. New World monkeys. And the Old World monkeys. Okay. So in the New World monkeys, here they live in trees. Live in trees in Central and South America. Mostly, right? Because we know that you might see them in other places. I'm not talking about the zoo. We actually, last summer, we went to Cancun for the summer, first time vacation. And we actually got to see a monkey. And we were going to something called a cenote. Which is like a water hole, I guess you can say. And we saw a monkey swing from one side of the road to another one between the trees. It was really cool. And the tourist guide was like, oh, that rarely happens. But anywho, so you might see them other places, but they typically live here. They have long, flexible arms, right, which they use for swinging in between trees, and of course, a long tail. This long tail is sometimes referred to as their fifth hand because they use it for grasping and other things like that. And here you'll see monkeys like the spider or the squirrel monkey. So typically smaller ones. Okay. For old world monkeys, we lack a long tail, right? And it is made up of hominoids. And well, what are hominoids? Oh, hominoids are great apes. And those great apes include orangutans, chimpanzees, and of course us humans. There's much more, but that's enough. And we know that we are closest to the chimpanzees, so let's talk about more of actual hominin or human evolution. All right. Hominin evolution. Hominin evolution. Another subheading. So here, humans split from chimpanzees. Humans split from chimpanzees. Oh. From chimpanzees, guess the number. I'm sure the authors didn't know what they were doing with that these numbers would ever become a thing. So humans split from chimpanzees about 6 to 7 million years ago. Years ago. Hence the reason why you'll have people be like, well, we don't necessarily look exactly like them, or, this and that. The reason being is 6 to 7 million years ago is a long time, right? We know that our DNA is very similar and we have similar characteristics, right? Like we'll talk about right now, like the grasping thumbs and things like that. But this happened 6 to 7 million years ago, which is a very, very long time. in the future, who knows what we're going to look like, right? What other characteristics we're going to develop to be able to adapt to the new environment on Earth. So hominins, oh my gosh, hominins evolved grasping thumbs, and large brains. Okay, so these two things. But of course, we know that there had to be other changes, right? So there had to be changes in the skull, the neck, spinal cord specifically, spinal column, and leg and hip bones for us to be able to walk upright, right? We know that these primates are able to, right, walk on twos, but they typically walked on all fours. And so in order to be walk on two, there had to be changes in the skull, neck, spinal column, leg, and hip bones in order to be able to walk upright. Right. So let's talk about that opposable thumb real quick. Why is it so important? Why is it such an important part of evolution? Because it was used to be able to touch the other fingerprints or other fingertips. Touch other fingertips. Because you can't necessarily touch. You can touch your other fingers, right? But you can't touch them like front to front, right? Face to face. You can only do that with your thumb. Touch other fingertips and grasp objects. So I want you to do something real quick. I want you to try it out. I want you to try writing just with your four fingers, your pointer finger through your pinky. Pretend you don't have your thumb. Pretend you don't have that space in between your thumb and your pointer finger. I want you to try writing. I want you to try to hold your pencil or your pen and see how easy or hard it is for you, right? For some of you, it might be super easy, right? I'm sure if we didn't have it, we would know how to do it. But now that we have it, it might make it a little bit harder. Also, our brains are about 4 times bigger than other primates, and at least 20 species and few subspecies. I promise my writing will get better. It's just been a while. A few subspecies are relatives of modern humans, but not all are human ancestors. So just to put this into perspective, because you can't be like, Miss Sanchez, isn't that like the same thing? It's not actually. Your aunts, your uncles, your cousins, your parents, grandparents, great-grandparents, all of that, they're all your relatives, right? You're related by blood. You have a relationship by blood. But they're not all your ancestors. Your ancestors are more your parents, your grandparents, your great-grandparents, and so forth. They're the people who reproduce to have you, right? So your parents. Then who reproduced to have them? Their parents, and so forth. So that is the difference between relative and ancestor. And because it's been so challenging to distinguish between these relatives from these ancestors for hominins, right? It's been very hard for them to come up with like a timeline or a step by step. They thought it was easy. They thought, oh, they're just evolving. Maybe after a certain amount of time, they evolved this and so forth. But it's not that simple. There's so many species that we're related to that they haven't been able to just come up with a single, like one way kind of timeline. And we know that because besides the relatives that we have, we've had to all adapt to these environmental changes. And because of that, there's different species and it's a whole thing. And so because there's no universally accepted hypothesis, we use a cladogram to show relationships instead of a family tree or a simple outline. And again, family tree, right? Because we have someone or some people at the top and then it splits up into the following. We don't have that here because we have so many relatives. All right, have a great rest of your day. We will continue off. We're not done yet. We're getting barely into the nitty-gritty part of it, but we'll continue tomorrow.